Consider our wealth of natural resources, ideal geographical location, manageable landscape, and fertile soil, abundant land, and a small population. Consider also that we speak the world's leading language, have multiple diverse cultures, and we are a warm and welcoming people. What then is preventing us from creating the Guyana that we all desire? What if Guyana lived up to its potential?
Welcome to the Face in the Future television program. We've been off the air for some time, but we're back. This is our 9th episode, so we're glad to have you joining us today. Just a gentle reminder, the FTF initiative is part of a group of civil organizations trying to revitalize political life here in Guyana and trying to get citizens involved in politics. So I'm going to introduce the team we have around the table. We're all part of Rights of Children ROC, one of the organizations part of the FTF initiative. I am Carrie-Ann, and
I'm Ashley, one of the coordinators for ROC, currently responsible for our school programs.
Hi everyone, I'm Donita. I'm a second-year chem student at UG. I'm also one of the coordinators at ROC. I'm responsible for video series, some video series that we show on campus.
The television program actually commenced last year during our electoral period. We focused mainly on our signature campaign, and we were trying to secure some electoral reforms in the electoral process. So we're trying to modernize it and make it more transparent and attractive, especially for young people like ourselves. So in today's program, we want to continue on a topic that we featured in a past program, trying to get citizens' involvement in decisions that affect their everyday lives. So we want to help people think their way through different situations or issues that may affect them so that they can develop ideas of their own.
Generally, things get thrown at you, and whether it be at school, at home, or even at work, and it's hard to figure out what to do. Most of the time you want to do the right thing, but at the same time you want to know why is it the right thing to do. Is it fair, for instance, that some people are wealthy enough that they can buy everything they need, for example, private security, private gym, or even private school? Or is it even okay for you to pay someone to have a baby for you? These are some of the things we would like to figure out over the series of shows.
So to help us figure some of these things out, ROC has adapted a video lecture series from a very popular Harvard professor, Mr. Michael Sandel, and each week we'll be following his lecture at his lecture theater at Harvard. So I hope you can join us.
Yes, presently we're also showing these video series at UG, and the students liked it so much that we decided we'll introduce it to a bigger audience, which is you.
Particularly hoping that students from the upper forms of secondary school will watch and discuss this video. And after watching the video, we'll let you know how you can get your responses to us. And next week, we'll also tell you the kind of responses that we received. So here we go.
Today, I'd like to turn our attention and get your views about an argument over the role of markets in the realm of human reproduction and procreation. It's the story of Baby M. It began with William and Elizabeth Stern, a professional couple, wanting a baby, but they couldn't have one on their own, at least not without medical risk to Mrs. Stern. They went to an infertility clinic where they met Mary Beth Whitehead, a 29-year-old mother of 2, the wife of a sanitation worker. She had replied to an ad that the center had placed, seeking the service of a surrogate mother. They made a deal. They signed a contract in which William Stern agreed to pay Mary Beth Whitehead a $10,000 fee plus all expenses, in exchange for which Mary Beth Whitehead agreed to be artificially inseminated with William Stern's sperm, to bear the child, and then to give the baby to the Sterns. Well, you probably know how the story unfolded. Mary Beth gave birth, and changed her mind. She decided she wanted to keep the baby. The case wound up in court in New Jersey. So let's put aside any legal questions and focus on this issue as a moral question. How many believe that the right thing to do in the Baby M case would have been to uphold the contract, to enforce the contract? And how many think the right thing to do would have been not to enforce that contract? So it's about, the majority say enforce. So let's now hear the reasons that people had, either for enforcing or refusing to enforce this contract. First, from those, I want to hear from someone in the majority. Why do you uphold the contract? Why do you enforce it? Who can offer a reason? Yes. Stand up.
It's a binding contract. All the parties involved knew the terms of the contract before any action was taken. If it's a voluntary agreement, the mother knew what she was getting into. All four intelligent adults, regardless of formal education, whatever. So it makes sense that if you know what you're getting into beforehand and you make a promise, you should uphold that promise in the end.
Okay. A deal is a deal, in other words.
Exactly.
And what's your name?
Patrick.
Is Patrick's reason the reason that most of you in the majority favored upholding the contract? Yes? All right, let's hear now someone who would not enforce the contract. What do you say to Patrick? Why not? Yes.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think contracts should be upheld when all the parties know all the information. But in this case, I don't think there's a way a mother, before the child exists, could actually know how she's going to feel about that child. So I don't think the mother actually had all the information. She didn't know the person that was going to be born and didn't know how much she would love that person. So that's my argument.
So you would not, and what's your name?
Evan Wilson.
Evan says he would not uphold the contract because when it was entered into, the surrogate mother couldn't be expected to know in advance how she would feel. So she didn't really have the relevant information when she made that contract. Who else? Who else would not uphold the contract? Yes.
I also think that a contract should generally be upheld, but I think that the child has an inalienable right to its actual mother, and I think that if that mother wants it, then that child should have the right to that mother. You
mean the biological mother, not the adoptive mother?
Right.
And why is that? First of all, tell me your name.
Anna.
Anna. Why is that, Anna?
Because I think that that bond that is created by nature is stronger than any bond that is created by, a contract.
Good. Thank you. Who else? Yes.
I disagree. I don't think that a child has an inalienable right to her biological mother. I think that adoption and surrogacy are both legitimate trade-offs. And I agree with the point made that it's a voluntary agreement. An individual made it. It's a voluntary agreement. And you can't apply coercion to this argument.
You can't apply the objection from coercion to this argument.
Correct.
What's your name?
Kathleen.
Kathleen, what do you say to Evan that though there may not have been, Evan claimed that the consent was tainted not by coercion but by lack of adequate information. She couldn't have known the relevant information, namely how she would feel about the child. What do you say to that?
I don't think the emotional content of her feelings plays into this. I think in a case of law, in the justice of this scenario, her change of feelings are not relevant. If I give up my child for adoption and then I decide later on that I really want that child back, too bad. It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off that the mother has made.
So a deal is a deal. You agree with Patrick?
I agree with Patrick. A deal is a deal. Yes.
Good. Yes.
I would say that, though I'm not really sure if I agree with the idea that the child has a right to their mother, I think the mother definitely has a right to her child. And I also think that there are some areas where market forces shouldn't necessarily penetrate. I think that the whole surrogate mother area smacks a little bit of dealing in human beings. It seems dehumanizing, and it doesn't really seem right. So that's my main reasoning.
And tell us your name.
I'm Andrew.
Andrew, what is dehumanizing about buying and selling the right to a child for money? What is dehumanizing about it?
Well, because you're buying someone's biological right. I mean, you can't, in the law as it's stated, you can't sell your own child. Like, were you to have a child, I believe that the law prohibits you selling it to another person or selling it.
So this is like baby selling.
Right. To a certain extent. I mean, though there is a contract with another person, you've made agreements and whatnot, there is an undeniable emotional bond that takes place between a mother and a child. And it's wrong to simply ignore this because you've written out something contractually.
All right, you want to reply to Andrew? Stay there.
You point out there's an undeniable emotional bond. I feel like in this situation, we're not necessarily arguing against adoption or surrogacy in itself. We're just sort of pointing out the emotional differences.
Well, but wait, I mean, it's easy to break everything down to numbers and say, oh, we have contracts like you're buying and selling a car. But there are underlying emotions. I mean, you're dealing with people. I mean, these are not objects to be bought and sold.
All right, what about Andrew's claim that this is like baby selling?
I believe that adoption and surrogacy should be permitted. Whether or not I actually will partake in it is not really relevant, but I think that the government should give its citizens the rights to allow for adoption and surrogacy.
But adoption is not, according to
Is adoption baby selling?
Well, do you think you should be able to bid for a baby that's up for adoption? That's Andrew's challenge.
Do I think I should be able to bid for a baby? I'm not sure. It's a market. I mean, I feel like the extent to which it's been applied, I'm not sure if the government should be able to permit it, and I have to think about it more, but...
All right, fair enough. Are you satisfied, Andrew?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think surrogacy should be permitted. I think that people can do it, but I don't think that it should be forced upon people that once the contract is signed, it's absolutely like the end all. I think that it's unenforceable.
So people should be free, Andrew, to enter into these contracts, but it should not be enforceable in a court.
Not in a court, no.
Who would like to join on one side or the other? Yes?
I think I have an interesting perspective on this because my brother was actually one of the people who donated to a sperm bank, and he was paid a very large amount of money. He was 6 feet tall, but not blonde. He had dimples, though. So he actually has... I'm an aunt now, and he has a daughter. He donated his sperm to a lesbian couple in Oklahoma, and he has been contacted by them, and he has seen pictures of his daughter, but he still does not feel an emotional bond to his daughter. He just has a sense of curiosity about what she looks like and what she's doing and how she is. He doesn't feel love for his child. So from this experience, I think the bond between a mother and a child cannot be compared to the bond between the father and the child.
That's really interesting. What's your name?
Vivian.
Vivian. So we've got the case of surrogacy, commercial surrogacy. And it's been compared to baby selling, and we've been exploring whether that analogy is apt. And it can also be compared, as you point out, to sperm selling. But you're saying that sperm selling and baby selling, or even surrogacy, are very different.
Yes, they're unequal services.
They're unequal services. Mm-hmm. And that's because, Vivian, you say that the tie, the bond...
Yes, and also the time investment that's given by a mother, 9 months, cannot be compared to a man going into a sperm bank, looking at pornography, depositing into a cup. I don't think those are equal.
Good. All right. So
because that's what happens in a sperm bank.
All right. So this is really interesting. We have, all right, notice the arguments that have come out so far. The objections to surrogacy, the objections to enforcing that contract are of at least two kinds. There was the objection about tainted consent, this time not because of coercion or implicit coercion, but because of imperfect or flawed information. So tainted or flawed consent can arise either because of coercion or because of a lack of relevant information, at least according to one argument that we've heard. And then a second objection to enforcing the surrogacy contract was that it was somehow dehumanizing. Now, when this case was decided by the courts, what did they say about these arguments? The lower court ruled that the contract was enforceable. Neither party had a superior bargaining position. A price for the service was struck and a bargain was reached. One side didn't force the other. Neither had disproportionate bargaining power. Then it went to the New Jersey Supreme Court. And what did they do? They said this contract is not enforceable. They did grant custody to Mr. Stern as the father because they thought that would be in the best interest of the child, but they restored the rights of Mary Beth Whitehead and left it to lower courts to decide exactly what the visitation rights should be. Regardless of any argument about consent or flawed consent or full information, there are some things in a civilized society that money can't buy. That's what the court said in voiding this contract. There was, it's true, a voluntary agreement, a contract struck between William Stern and Mary Beth Whitehead. But there are at least two ways that consent can be other than truly free. First, if people are pressured or coerced to give their agreement. And second, if their consent is not truly informed. And in the case of surrogacy, the court said, a mother can't know, even one who already has kids of her own, what it would be like to bear a child and give it up for pay. So in order to assess criticism, objection number one, we have to figure out just how free does a voluntary exchange have to be with respect to the bargaining power and equal information. Question number one, how do we assess the second objection? The second objection is more elusive, it's more difficult. Andrew acknowledged this, right? What Anderson is suggesting is that certain goods should not be treated as open to use or to profit. Certain goods are properly valued in ways other than use. What are other ways of valuing and treating goods that should not be open to use? Anderson says there are many. Respect, appreciation, love, honor, awe, sanctity. There are many modes of valuation beyond use, and certain goods are not properly valued if they're treated simply as objects of use. Several years ago, there was a scandal surrounding a doctor, an infertility specialist in Virginia named Cecil Jacobson. He didn't have a donor catalog because, unknown to his patients, all of the sperm he used to inseminate his patients came from one donor, Dr. Jacobson himself. At least one woman who testified in court was unnerved at how much her newborn daughter looked just like him. Now, it's possible to condemn Dr. Jacobson for failing to inform the women in advance. That would be the argument about consent. The columnist Ellen Goodman described the bizarre scenario as follows. Dr. Jacobson, she wrote, gave his infertility business the personal touch. But now the rest of us, she wrote, are in for a round of second thoughts about sperm donation. Goodman concluded that fatherhood should be something you do, not something you donate. And I think what she was doing, and what the philosopher Elizabeth Anderson is doing, and what Andrew was suggesting with his argument about dehumanization, is pondering whether there are certain goods that money shouldn't buy, not just because of tainted consent, but also perhaps because certain goods are properly valued in a way higher than mere use.
So I hope you liked that video, and I just want to bring up the question, do we feel comfortable about the idea of another person carrying a baby for us and then being financially rewarded for that act? I mean, is it the process that we're uncomfortable with, you know, the woman carrying a child for 9 months, or is it because we have money involved and this person is being paid to carry the child?
Well, for me, Carrie Ann, I think that in the first place, a deal is a deal. And the ad was in the paper, and she willingly accepted it. Nobody forced her. So she should have known beforehand all the factors that she should have taken into consideration, whether it be how she feels about this child, that she wouldn't want to give it up when the child is born. To say that she doesn't want to give up the child after she signed the contract, that's my problem.
In this situation, why this surrogacy is different is that, and to me, I think you have this mother producing her own egg with a donor sperm, which can be any person, and then the child is born. So that means that child would have her characteristics.
But she knew that, right? She knew that before she did all of this, before she accepted the contract. She has children before, so the process of childbearing is nothing new.
Yeah, but still, you don't know what would happen at the end. To me, okay, for example, you have, in some countries, you have some poor women act as surrogate mothers because all they see is the money, and, you know, bearing this child is not a problem. They just see the money and that's it.
My point is, she had 3 kids before. 3. She knew exactly what she was getting into, and she went and still signed a legal contract. And I'm sure there was no part of this contract that said, okay, if you decide at the end that you want to keep this child, then the contract is terminated. She signed a contract, even though it was her egg. She did sign a contract stating, well, okay, I'm doing this for a certain amount of money, and when this baby is born, I hand the baby over to the persons that paid her. So she was paid, and she had 3, not 1, not 2, 3 of them.
And then the other thing is, I mean, she knows from the very beginning that this child is not her child. So she
even though it was her egg.
But it is her child. I mean, how do you put a price? Okay, I'm going to pay you for your egg. It's the same thing like saying, I made a child and I'll sell you my child.
But it was her choice. It was her choice. They didn't go looking for her. Exactly. She went looking for them.
So she can't play the victim role here. She knowingly accepted that. It's just like if you're going into a sport, and like football, and you know when you're in football, people will tackle you, you'll get hurt. You can't sue somebody for hitting you in football. You knowingly went into football.
Yeah, exactly.
How far does the law or society have on life? I mean, this is not a commodity or a good, you know, something you utilize. It's a life. It can only go so far that you can say this contract on this piece of paper, to say that bond between a mother and a child, to say this piece of paper could tell me I need to give this person, or to break that bond with my child.
Well, okay.
How far does it go?
Let's look at it like this. If we give that one person a slap on the wrist and allow her to take back her child, don't you think that it will form a pattern or a trend? Everybody now will start taking back their child.
But that won't be a bad thing. In that way, we're looking at the moral side of things.
But that's
we shouldn't be.
So what about the couples that can't have children? Are we going to say that they're doomed forever? They could just, you know, if one person approaches them, they should say, no, you take back your money. I mean, we can't have you anymore.
We're not shunning the technology of surrogacy somebody else making the child, but it shouldn't be something binding. It should be something at the end of the 9 months.
I think the whole binding thing is for some sort of form of security for people.
Don't you think when you do that, it would give other people the right? Women that are poor would say, okay, I'm going to go have someone's baby, take their money, and then the law is protecting me. So in the end, I'm going to keep their money as well as keep their baby.
They don't get to keep the money. Suppose they just want to keep the baby.
But either way, they're going to still be paid because their hospital bills will be paid already. Yeah, so it's a win-win for them in any way. Okay, so one of the things I'm a bit uncomfortable with is the fact that if she felt that she needed to do it, or if she was obligated because she was poor and she already had 3 kids and her husband was a sanitary worker, if she felt that she had to do this to keep her family or to get more money.
So they're kind of like taking advantage of the poverty situation. So the couple is trying to take advantage of these poor people.
Yeah, because they know they need the money.
There are some cases where there are couples that can't make plausible technology or something.
But it's just a way in which they can get money. And it's not like a small sum of money. I mean, you're being paid a lot to do this. And if she felt that, all right, I'm poor, and this is a fast, probably a very long 9 months, but still it's fast for me to get this kind of money. And given the economy and everything, and it's really hard to get a job. And all you need to go and do is give your womb, carry a baby for 9 months, deliver a baby, and that's it.
But I'm still thinking that, yes, carry on.
As long as you're saying, as long as the person signed this contract, okay, we'll make a baby. You're poor, you want the money, make my child, that's the end of it. But where does the end come? Because it's a similar situation for blood donation, that you're not allowed to pay people to donate blood because people might go beyond their healthy means of blood donation in the same line of being poverty-stricken or being poor.
I don't have a problem if you're in a situation where you can't have a child. You're probably sick or something along that line that you can't have a child, and you have the money and you can afford to pay someone to do it. But to that point where you just don't want to do it, and because you have the money, you can afford it, you just decide, okay, I have the money, she's poor, I know she'll need it, so yeah, she's gonna carry my baby for me. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that person. But just because they're rich and they have the money, they take advantage of it.
Spoil the shape and
or go through labor pain or something along that line.
So what if the health authorities actually provide this service? Then in that way we can eliminate the financial aspect, I would say, so that everyone can have this service available to them.
Yeah, because that will be a big plus, given that there are probably some poor couples that have some kind of illness and they can't have a child, but then they can't afford to pay someone to have a child. In that case, then they're poor, but they can still go there and get the
free, like
because they can't afford it. So when it's
adoption agency, probably the same thing, the same theory kind of applies. You just go in, state your claim, and once you meet the requirements, you can have your child
without money,
free of cost.
Okay, everybody, we have your point of views, but how do you feel? These are some of the questions we want you to ponder and give us feedback on. Is it okay for couples who cannot make a child to do it this way through surrogate motherhood? Or are we uncomfortable about the financial aspect and the commercialization of the process where money is being involved? Or how do you feel if this service was provided through the Ministry of Health as a service of surrogacy? So these are some of the questions we want you to give us feedback for our next program, and all our contact information can be seen right on your screen. So thank you for staying tuned. This was the FTF television program.